Now that we're ready to move into week 6 of the fantasy football season and bye weeks are now upon us, who are the players you should be targeting on the waiver wire to replace those players who are on bye or are injured? Stick around and find out. Welcome back to Endgame Community. I'm Pierre, here to help you as always with some waiver wire decisions and some injury updates heading into week 6. Let's start out with the big one. Another running back, unfortunately, it looks like his season is over, and that is Rashad Penny of the Seattle Seahawks. Just came off a monster game and suffered what is looking like a fractured tibia, and that means surgery is likely, and for the most part, his season is over, if not officially. We'll find out soon, but look, he has to be dropped everywhere in fantasy leagues, and obviously, the pivot here is Kenneth Walker, who I'll talk more about in the waiver wire pickups, but this is a guy who just needs to be added everywhere. I don't care if you feel like you need a running back or not, you have to go get him. And if you're watching the Sunday night game, you might have wondered, where's T. Higgins? You check the box score, you might think that he didn't even play. Well, it's sort of true. He didn't play beyond the early part of the second quarter. He left because that ankle that had been bothering him all week in practice flared up. He didn't want to push it, and so he got a big 0 in the box score. That's right, no catches, nothing for T. Higgins, and you probably had him in your lineup, so obviously disappointing. We'll see what his status is heading into week 6, but obviously the fact that he couldn't go in this game makes you worry, and of course you don't want to be left with another goose egg, so just keep an eye on T. Higgins. You know, Mike Thomas got a little bit more run here. Tyler Boyd really didn't see an uptick in targets. This whole offense just didn't do a lot, even against this Baltimore defense that had been giving up the most points to wide receivers. So you got to wonder if Cincinnati's offense is really going to even match what they did last year. And then in the Patriots game, you might have seen that Ramondre Stevenson had a big game, thanks in part to the fact that Damian Harris left that game early in the first half with a hamstring injury. Not known how severe it is as of right now. These things, could resolve quickly or they can linger for a while. So you're going to have to monitor. Ramondre Stevenson probably owned in most leagues. So there really isn't much behind him. They didn't even have another running back active. Will Pierre Strong finally get a chance? Is it J.J. Taylor? Who knows, but you probably don't need to worry about it. So just know that Damian Harris, it might be without him next week. And then in Arizona, James Conner banged up once again. He left this game with a rib injury early on. And then one of his replacements, Darrell Williams, well, he left in the third quarter with a knee injury. That left Eno Benjamin to own the backfield all to himself. And he did okay. I mean, he scored a touchdown. He got, 60-something total yards. He looked fine. Now, what's happening next week is going to be unclear. Conner, as usual, is going to be questionable. This is something that it depends. If there are no fractures and it's just kind of a cartilage injury, then maybe he doesn't even miss a game. It could be a pain threshold type of thing, but we will see. For now, if you do have to pivot from Conner, I mean, Benjamin looks like the guy. Again, we don't know how severe Darrell Williams' injury is, but Benjamin is probably going to be next in line. It just so happens he has a smash spot here with Seattle next on the schedule. So if you do need to replace Conner or anybody who's on bye, you might want to look to Benjamin. And then in concussion news, let's start with a talented rookie receiver, Chris Olave. You saw that great touchdown catch he had, but slow to get up. It looked like, he hit his head really hard on the turf, and it was a little scary too. Something kind of similar to the Tua situation. Just didn't look right on the way up. So obviously in the concussion protocol, don't know whether he's going to miss next week, but you might need to make plans to be without him. And look, this Saints offense is hurting across the board. Yeah, they got Kamara back, but obviously Michael Thomas has missed a couple games. Jarvis Landry missed this game. I mean, they could be without their top 3 receivers. Is Traquan Smith or Marquez Callaway worth an ad next week? Maybe, if you're really desperate. I mean, maybe if Jameis Winston comes back. But at this point, let's say maybe we just don't invest too much in this Saints offense unless you want to just roll the dice with Taysom Hill again. Then Pat Freiermuth, talented tight end in Pittsburgh. Thought he might get a good target share with the rookie Kenny Pickett at quarterback. But he left with concussion too. What's scary is that this is his third in now just barely even parts of 2 seasons. So you've got to wonder if that might prolong his return. So if you have been riding the Fryer goat at tight end, you might have to make other plans next week. And then finally, we do have to talk about Russell Wilson. Just when you thought, well, maybe he's not even fantasy relevant anymore. Well, just to add things, kind of add injury onto insult after that kind of nauseating game on Thursday night. Well, now it's been found out that he has a partial lat strain. So this is something that may or may not keep him out of game action, but is something that could affect his throwing and especially the deep ball, according to those who know in the medical field. Well, it's not like he'd been doing that great anyways. I think this just kind of is the kicker that means you could probably drop Russell Wilson if you've been worrying about him, which you should be. I mean, at this point, the injury on top of the fact that they've been playing poorly, just don't see it happening. But for now, I say yes, you should be worried about Russ and you could drop him. All right, let's talk about the top waiver wire pickups heading into week 6. And number 1, clearly, far and away, is Kenneth Walker, rookie running back out of Seattle. Now, first of all, this is a guy who had some intrigue even before the season started. We didn't know what this backfield would look like between Penny and Walker. Well, Penny was clearly the guy. Walker, kind of banged up at the preseason, was slow played. And then, of course, Penny looked great last week. And so Walker really hadn't, just didn't have a foothold at all in his backfield and wasn't owned in a lot of leagues. People were dropping him. Well, if you stashed him, then congratulations. You saved yourself a lot of fab. If he's out there in your league, yes, you do want to empty the wallet. Just to make this clear, this is a guy who is worth your number 1 waiver claim. He is worth, if not all your fab, a healthy chunk of it, over 50%. Yes, you want to spend up on him. Why? Well, number 1, how many starting running backs in the NFL are just out there on waiver wire? And not just a guy who's going to be the starter for his team, but now with Penny out and really not a lot of depth there, it's a guy who's going to be a workhorse. Now, the kind of knock on him is that maybe he's not a great pass catcher. And honestly, Seattle hasn't been throwing the ball to its running backs a lot this year anyways. They might see a guy like DJ Dallas get in there on third downs. Walker is not going to necessarily have that floor in full PPR leagues. I don't expect him to catch that many passes, but it's not that he can't catch passes. He's actually not bad at that. It's just he wasn't used in that role a lot of Michigan State. Well, he might not be used much in that role again in Seattle, but you know what? That's okay because what you saw when he did replace Penny this past game against the Saints is what he can do. He doesn't need a ton of volume. He can take it one cut and go. He can take it to the house. He has the ability to make tacklers miss, and he has breakaway ability. And he's a guy who is a hard-nosed runner. He will be scoring some touchdowns, and this Seattle offense looks legit. I mean, I think it's safe to say now we can't just brush off Geno Smith and this offense. I don't know how, but they did it. You actually have to give some credit to Pete Carroll here, putting together a really strong offensive performance. And also the fact that their defense isn't very good. They're going to have to keep, putting pressure on by putting up points. So, look, Kenneth Walker is a guy, yes, you definitely want to spend up for. If nothing else, you want to get him so that your opponents don't. This guy could be a league winner. Another running back that bears mentioning, well, very opposite end of the spectrum. Instead of a rookie, we got a veteran here on the wrong side of 30. That's Raheem Mostert. This is somebody did not think that we'd be saying is a high priority pickup at this point. But look, here's the thing. We thought Chase Edmonds would own this Miami backfield. And now Chase Edmonds, you got to wonder what is going on with him because it's not just that Mostert is looking good. Because he is, right? Mostert, we've always known, can break off big runs, is a quality running back. He just hasn't stayed healthy. So far, so good in that department. But here's the thing. It's not just that he's having to, share time with Edmonds and prove that he can be a part of this backfield. He is the backfield. Chase Edmonds, I get no idea why, but this past week against the Jets, 1 carry. That's it. 1 carry, no catches. We even thought at least he would be that pass catching back. So Chase Edmonds, something has happened because they were really high on him in the preseason. Of course, they gave him that contract. We thought he would be the perfect fit for this offense, and now he's just disappeared. Don't know why, but look, it's Raheem Mostert all the way, getting over 100 yards this past week, and he's getting all the touches, so he's practically the workhorse there in Miami. Things will get better. I know, obviously, Dolphins looking grim the last couple weeks. That's because we had a third-string quarterback this past week against the Jets. Tua will be back soon, and I think that Mostert will continue to do what he does as long as he stays healthy. Now let's talk about Jacoby Myers. This is somebody who was dropped in a lot of leagues because he didn't even play the last 2 weeks, and he was questionable going into week 5. We weren't really sure what his status is with a knee injury, and then the fact that the Patriots also had a third string quarterback in there, a rookie, a guy who's a late round pick. We didn't know what to expect from this offense in general. We thought maybe just run the ball a lot, and really no receivers were worth rostering. Well, we were wrong. Jakobi Meyers is definitely worth rostering. He went over 100 yards. In fact, 7 catches for 111 yards and a touchdown with Bailey Zappi throwing to him. So Meyers, this shouldn't shock us that he was the #1 receiver, because that's what he was doing before he got hurt. This is a guy who has now 27 targets in the 3 games he's played. And before he was injured in week 2, he had 95 yards. This is somebody who has been productive, and I mean, honestly, despite the fact that they got Devontae Parker, they still have Nelson Aguilar, Tyquan Thornton coming back. You know what? It doesn't matter. Jakobi Meyers is clearly the target hog there, and it looks like it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. So this is a guy in full PPR leagues is worth a pretty strong bid, because I think he'll continue to see that strong target share going forward. And Mac Jones should be back pretty soon, at least another week or 2. Now, if you watch that Thursday night game, well, there was one bright spot, and that was seeing Alec Pierce, the rookie for Indianapolis, kind of emerge. I did talk about him just before this week, and kind of that beat the breakout pickup video. You know, not a guy that you need to necessarily add right now and start. Well, maybe I should have, but look, if you did take my advice and you added him, you're glad you don't have to worry about bidding up, because you got him on your roster, and you see what he did, 8 catches for 81 yards. Now, on the one hand, yeah, that did come a lot late in the game, and that was after there were some injuries in the secondary there to Denver, but it is worth noting that he was the leading target on the team, right? More than Michael Pittman, more than those tight ends and anybody else. I think that means that Matt Ryan does have some trust in him. And look, even though week 1 he didn't catch a pass, he got 2 end zone targets. That is notable. He's been catching some deep balls. The last couple of weeks, we've seen his involvement get more and more. So it's obvious now that he is a trusted target, Matt Ryan, and there's really not a lot behind Michael Pittman. I think Pierce had already earned a starting job coming out of training camp, and now he's just solidified it. I think his target share is going to keep growing. He can make those big plays. He can get some action in the end zone, assuming the Colts get near the red zone in the first place. I think this offense will eventually come around to get better. I'm not saying they'll be great, but look, Pierce is a guy that can put up numbers without necessarily needing a ton of targets. So I feel pretty good about him. You know what? He's not necessarily a guy you have to plug and play right now. It's going to be a little matchup dependent, but for the most part, I feel pretty good about rostering him in 12-team leagues or deeper. Last but not least, it's time to give him his due. Geno Smith is worth adding in fantasy. That's right. In the year 2022, Geno Smith is the QB5 in fantasy, ahead of Justin Herbert, ahead of a lot of guys that were drafted ahead of him, because everybody was drafted ahead of him. Nobody thought Geno Smith would be fantasy relevant. He is the 5th leading scorer among quarterbacks. Now, a lot of this, we kind of blew off last week, to be honest. To some extent, I said, yeah, it was Detroit. Let's not take this too far, right? There was a score fest in that game because, well, both defenses are bad. Let's see how he does on the road in New Orleans. Well, how did he do? He threw 3 touchdowns and 268 yards, even though he only threw the ball 25 times. All right, so they didn't pull out the W, but he's still putting up numbers. DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett now look like guys you just can start every single week. We don't have to worry about them. And, with the fact that Penny is out, yeah, I talked about Walker and Walker being a must-add, but this kind of puts more pressure on the passing game to perform because they're just so thin now at running back. I think we could see Geno Smith do even more down the stretch. So, look, I'm not going to go crazy and say, drop Joe Burrow for him or do anything like that. But Geno Smith is going to be a strong streamer now that bye weeks have started. You might need to replace some guys who are on bye. Of course, injuries happen. So, if you need a quarterback, really, if Geno Smith's out there, he has to be your top choice. All right, those are my top waiver wire picks heading into week 6. We'll have even more advice for you for waiver wire trades and anything you want to ask us on our live Tuesday night show. So join us then. And for everything for week 6 to help you set those winning lineups, go ahead and check out our playlist for all the advice that you need.